Hi, everybody. I'm Lainie Mumbrue, and I'm here to talk to you about post-production, the ins and outs of post, and mostly to share with you how it is a lot more than just editing. And I'm gonna kind of walk you through my career, and I'm gonna um, tell you the things I've learned along the way, give you an idea of all the jobs that are out there, and answer any questions you have as well. So I guess I will just get started. I don't know if I'm going to be able to see you guys. I hope I can. I'd like to see you guys, but I'm just going to get started. I'm going to talk about how I got started in my career. I moved out here in the early 90s and I knew absolutely nothing about post-production. My main goal was to get work on a show. And so I was lucky enough that I did. It took about a year. I was doing things that were really just very not actually, when I first moved out here, I was doing tons of just temp work. And I sent resumes to everybody, and I got really lucky, and I got a call to be a production assistant on a television show with a company called, it was Stephen Bochco Networks, and they were, or Stephen Bochco Productions, and they had a few shows on the air. And because they were successful, one of the nice things about working there is I got to work there for 4 years. And because of that, they kind of put you on a path when you were a production assistant. Your next step was you were going to be, you were going to go into post-production. So my first year as a production assistant, and the second year, I was a post-production assistant with two other people, and we rotated in, and they did this because they knew there was another show coming the year after that, and they wanted to make sure that we liked post. So I'm not going to talk too much about working on shows because my focus and what I do now is I work at a network and I work in short form. But I did want to talk about my early experience because it informs everything I do now. I also want to talk about it because I think it shows there's no one right path for getting into television, getting into post-production, getting into production. And as a larger overview, I think that's like one of the best things that you can remember. So I started on hour-long dramas. They were scripted. And like I said, I sort of got thrown into post-production. It was, at the time, also a very different world. It was, you know, before YouTube, before I think people really needed you or wanted to see that you had hands-on experience before working. And which was really fortunate for me because I really didn't have any production experience before I started. I had done a few internships, relatively unrelated, and I was working at a place that was more than willing to train me to do what I wanted to do. And also, I think that's one of the best things about post-production. I think it's a trainable, to this day, it's trainable. There are so many different directions that you can go, and I think it's really important to remember that you don't have to know anything. I happily would take a coordinator right now who didn't know anything about post-production, but who, if they had the right attitude and they were willing to like really work hard, I would teach them everything they needed to know. So to this day, I'm pretty sure that the majority of people I know who don't work in television, when I tell them I work in post-production, they just really assume that I'm an editor, and or they ask if I'm an editor, and I am not an editor. And there are so many other jobs, and the best way I learned that was being a post-production assistant. When I was a post-production assistant, you realize that you have to deal with everybody, like right away. You have to talk to the creatives, and you have to also talk to the editors, and you have to talk to people on the stages, and you just have to know everybody's language, because everybody has different goals and everybody wants different things, and at the end of the day, it's post-production that has to get it done. So when I started in post, I had to get dailies. Now dailies are, of course, everything's digital. I actually had to like physically pick them up, but because I had to do that, I realized that there was a Posthouse, and there were people in audio who the only thing they did was edit dialogue instead of editing, you know, instead of being on a mix stage. But I also spent hours on a mix stage. And so the year after, I was a production assistant, and you know, also music. I had to drive to the music people. So you see all these people and how it ultimately has to come together, how I had to bring everything to an editor and it all had to come together. And so that was the first lesson I learned. And then the next year, I was pretty much just thrown into it. I had had a little bit of training as a PA, but I was then, as a post coordinator, I was put into a room. And this was the first time I sat with a colorist who was doing all the color correction for the show, which meant that I had to, with the colorist, execute the vision of the director. We had to have it, like certain scenes had to look a certain way, and I had to understand that. And by sitting with a colorist 8 hours a day, I really was able to train my eye. I think it's helpful if you already have, I think if you already have a good eye or an interest in art and color, but it is also something that you can learn. And I would encourage every single person to be curious. Is a huge thing. I asked a ton of questions working with colorists of why they were choosing to do certain things. I also learned to see things where I could say that person looks a little green, or that looks a little yellow, or more importantly, to say, I know we're going to get a note on that because I know that's not what the director's going for. I also sat in an online bay where I saw it all come together. We took a colored show, and then we had to add in credits, and we had to basically build the show and make sure the dissolves were where they were supposed to be and things were blown up the way they were supposed to be, which again is just sort of executing. Now I'm sort of executing more of an editor's vision and the producer's vision. And then we would take that and we would go and we would marry it all to audio. And so I was like taking physical tapes to different places and different locations. And in this, of course, now it would be files that would be sent to different people in different locations. But I was getting a real sense of all these things that were out there. And that made post-production really fun. I never thought I'd work in post-production. I think when I first came out, I thought, you know, I was going to be at a network. Maybe I was going to be in development. To this day, I love watching, I love reading scripts. I love watching shows come together. This year is not fun because unfortunately because there's no fall launch, and so I always really enjoy watching all of the new shows, and of course we don't have any. And but back to post-production, it just gave me a sense of how big it was. And so I did post for probably the first 7 years that I worked out here, and I worked on various things. After I left Botchko, I worked on like live, not a live show, but a live on tape show that had an audience. I worked on a game show, and eventually I worked on a television movie, and that was it for me. At the end of that, I am incredibly grateful for all my production experience. It was amazing. It's unique. I completely understand that not everybody gets the chance to do that. And so I'm very I'm very grateful for it, and I get asked on a regular basis why I left it, and the reason I left it is because I knew it wasn't for me. And I didn't want to be a director. I didn't want to be a writer. Um, I just, I didn't see my career building in the way I wanted that fit my personality. And for some people, it really does. If you are an associate producer and you work to be a co-producer, you can be involved in all of the post-production on a show. And and you can sit on stages for audio stages and listen to mix and sign off on all the mixes, and you can really be a part of that show coming together at the end. And it is completely and totally worth it. And if that is what you're into, and I highly recommend it. It's fun, and like I said, there are a lot of different areas to go into. I'm going to switch gears a little and talk about my move to a network. First, I'm going to ask if anybody has a question. Feel free to put it in the chat, and I will get to it. So if you want to know anything more, you have any questions about working on a show right now, feel free to ask me, and I will be happy to go back as well. But otherwise, I'm going to tell you about my turn to working in a network and getting into short form. So for me, after working on this last movie, which was crazy, by the way, I think it was sort of, for me, it was the final straw. I had been working on a movie. It was for HBO, for a movie that nobody ever saw because it was pretty mediocre, especially by HBO standards. And I was supposed to come in and work for 5 weeks, and I wound up working for 5 months. And so at that point, I was done. We had gone through 3 editors. We had way too many cooks in the kitchen, as they say. And I had really been thinking about this point about wanting to move to a network, and that experience was just crazy enough for me to be like, yeah, this is kind of what I want to move away from. So working at networks, so now I had to make a decision. So all I know at this point, I've done 7 years of post-production. How do I translate my post-production experience to go work at a network? And what are the possibilities for me of working at a network? It turns out that there's a lot. I'd say there's even more these days. For me, initially, Onair Promo is really the way to go. And it was my first introduction into getting to a network, and pretty much with a few detours here and there, really staying at a network. So the cool thing about Onair Promo is that for the most part, it's the only place at a network where you're actually producing television. There's this huge network, and most people there have never been part of a production and on stage. And so it's kind of cool that you're the only people who you're part of this team that actually makes television that airs, because everybody else is either, development, or their, finances. And I mean, there's it's a network, and there are a huge amount of people. But when it comes to Onair Promo and the marketing team, you're the ones that are actually putting stuff on the air for the network. Everything else is given to them by outside producers. So I was able to take everything that I had learned in this long form world, and then I decided that I was going to move to the network, and I was going to translate that to a short form world. And for me, it was the best decision. A network, it suits my personality. I had said earlier that, that I thought that I'd be at a network and, maybe in development, but I think what I really wanted was just to be at a network. And this was the path that I was on, and I was completely happy at this point to stay on it. So now I want to tell you all the different things that when you're working in Onair Promo, and now there's probably, I started an Onair Promo, but there's digital teams, and there's teams that are working to put things on for, whether it's the web or social and stuff like that. But all those teams tend to fall under the marketing, which is promo. And most of those teams at some point they might be producing original content, but a lot of the content, almost all of the content, comes from the Onair Promo team that we give to those other teams. So in post-production, you can start as a production assistant, move to a post coordinator, post supervisor, room producer, and then what I am now, which is manager of post-production, and then it would be probably senior manager, director, VP. So that's just my path. There's other stuff out there too. So of course there's editors. The editors in a network on air, you have a creative team. And the coolest thing that you really understand, again, in post-production, you have to be able to talk to everybody. So I was able to take all my experience from the very first job I had and realize, like, oh, right, I had spent time on a stage. I could talk to actors, I could talk to directors. I, at the same time, had to be able to talk to the post team, and I had to be able to talk to a post facility and translate everybody's desires and everybody's needs, and then just sort of, bring it all together so we could actually get something done. I don't know if I said this already, but I will say, if you're looking for glory, if you want to be the one in front of the camera or being interviewed or, a real glory position, post-production is not for you. Post-production, we are the people that get stuff done. And I kind of love that. So you will get praise from your peers, but ultimately, you're not the one who came up with the creative idea, and those are the people who are going to get the awards. And I'm fine with that. So it's just a matter of being fine with that. So moving to network, I started as a coordinator. I sort of took a lateral move from where I was, and there were things that were very similar and things that were very, very different. Things that were similar is that we had writer producers, we had a creative team, and then and so they created a vision of what they wanted, and then I and my team, we would take that vision and we would finish it. So we're really, post-production in Onair Promo is very much, you will often hear it is the finishing team. There are also editors in post-production, but they are finishing editors, which is a very different job. So the finishing editors in my world are generally people who are going to do all the color, they're going to drop in all the graphics, they're the ones who are going to get the final product out. So the creative team puts it all together. They have come out, they have done the cut, they have done the edit, they have done their mix all in Avid or Premiere, and then they will give that to us and we finish it. And so the editors are very different. So they kind of have to be a jack of all trades. You have to be technical, you have to be creative, you have to have a good eye for color. But the other thing I find is there's some people who just want to make things pretty or just want to cut and just want to make things fun. This goes for graphic people too. There's people who, if you can work on an ad campaign for maybe 6 months and you really just want to make it pretty and great. Promo, one of the things I love about it is it's fast. It is like you get things, you know, you're getting things out every single week. Everything's changing every single week. So you don't fall in love with something quite as much as when you work on a show. A show is going to be long lasting. It's going to go into reruns. You know, you're going to see all these things and it's going to be amazing. Promo is amazing in a totally different way, is just that you have to get everything ready for air in this very quick time constraint. You might get a promo the day before, you might get a promo in the morning that airs at 5 o'clock that night. And that's one of the things I really love. It also means that sometimes you're creative, you have to get it good enough for air, but it might not be as perfect as you want to be, and you want it to be, and you have to be okay with that. And that, I think that can be really hard for somebody who's just purely creative. But I will say there's really no point if you can't, there's no point in getting something perfect if it never makes air, right? Because then nobody sees it. Oh, I have a question. How do you make, so, hi Zeke. How did you make the adjustment to the speed of on-air promos compared to long-form post? It was an adjustment. Like I was just saying, it does change your brain. I think I'm a little more built for it, to tell you the truth. I don't think everybody is. You have to find what really works for you. There is a speed. Like I said, something might not be able to be perfect. So you have to have the mindset that you can be okay with that you have to be like, it's got to go. And, but you also have to be, you want to make it look as good as you can, and you don't want to compromise. And so it's a tough balance. My very first job before I moved to LA, I went to school in Indiana, but I grew up in Detroit. I moved back to Detroit after school, and I worked in live news, and I was just production assistant. But I actually think that initial experience was probably a really good experience for me to have, because once something's done, it's done. And that's sort of how promo goes, where there is a point where you are working right up to the last minute. And then at the same time, you're just like, you might have a creative director sitting right next to you, and you're like, if this doesn't go, we're not going to make air. And you have to get them to sign off on that. And you have to be the person in the room who's willing to say, I know it's not exactly what you want, but it's not going to make air. And inevitably they understand that too, and they're just like, you know what, it's fine. The other thing about on-air promo is promo generally isn't a one-off. So it's a one-off for that week, but maybe it's not a one-off. So let's say I have a next Wednesday version, I get that one out for air, and then I come back and I fix the other ones, or get the other ones to be a little more perfect. So there's that. But it is an adjustment. I also think it's a personality. I think everybody in post-production is a little OCD, where, you know, you're kind of asked to see 30 frames per second, or 24 if you're working in 24p, and you know, you're asked to see color, and you're expected to hear very, you know, like very specific things that are going on in the audio. You might be listening to a line, and you know, more than once, it's like, you know, someone says like, did you get it? And it's like, I don't know if I heard the t in the T. So it's like, you get really, it's a position where you learn to really focus on the little things. And so it is a massive balance between time and perfection, and deciding, you know, what perfect means in that moment, because perfect for air might be as good as you get. But my job always is to make, I never want anybody to look at anything, and people who don't know, it's not their job to know. I never want anybody to look at something that's on air and say, well, that looks weird, or that sounds weird. And they might not be able to pinpoint why it sounds weird, but it's my job to make sure that it's perfect for air. And so, and then, you know, tweaks might come, but everything has to be perfect for air. So to get down sort of into more of the jobs that that go on in a network for post-production, it depends on the size. First of all, you might get I worked at CBS, and CBS was a lot bigger. So we had a 10-person team doing my job as room producers and post supervisors. We had a couple coordinators, and then we had a huge creative team, as well as a giant staff of, I think we had about 30 writer producers. I work at Freeform now. It is me as a manager. I have a coordinator. We have 3 in-house writer producers, and I think we have 8 editors all together. So not very many. So it's pretty small, but smaller network, smaller volume of stuff going on, and at the same time, a different kind of busyness. I'm never not busy, which is a good thing. The things that are different and that you should know about going into post-production is you can have in-house and out-of-house post-production. At CBS, we did everything in-house. We had all our editors, all our finishing, all our audio was all in-house. So the different jobs that were included there, like I said, there's editors, finishing editors, and we had audio mixers, and then we had the entire post-production team that had to, our coordinators were responsible for getting all the files to the final destination, so they actually made air. We had, and then my job, I was room producer. And so I was in a room, either in audio or video, and my job was both to work with the editors and the audio mixers. They would do their job and they would mix, but it was my job to have an opinion. And so, you know, as color correction was going on, you know, I definitely would say, like, hey, I don't like that shot. I don't think it's cutting well with the next shot. And so my job was to have an opinion. My job was also, more than anything, to make sure that my editors get to do everything that they need to do, so without being interrupted. So it's my job to manage the room. It is my job to answer the phone, make calls to graphics if we're missing a graphics, just to manage their time so everything goes as smoothly as possible. So those are some of the jobs. Getting back to sort of like in editorial and graphics, again, I think it's a very specific mindset. A finishing editor is very different than a creative editor. I think I work with a finishing editor right now who I've known for years, and he very much considers himself an artist when it comes to color correction. And he takes it very seriously. And promo color correction can be some of the most complicated color correction too, because instead of just one scene, you're very often faking reactions, right? Like something might be cut together and, you know, someone, you know, one of the main characters says something and they're inside in an office and the reaction comes from somebody who's outside, and that's how you tell a story through it. But that means you're going to have very different color and very different lighting, and so you kind of have to balance it all the way through. So that's the creative part. Like that's the fun part and the part that I find creative. Like I love color correction, and again, this goes all the way back to, you know, me working on long form and sitting for hours in telecine and having someone teach me, you know, why things look the way they look. My job also is I was in meetings and I had discussions with the creative team. And because I had those discussions, I could translate notes, like things would come back into the room, and it was my job to say, the editor might do something, and it was my job to say, they're going to hate that, and it's going to get kicked back. So even though it looks good, we have to do it differently. And so it was very much my job to translate, like to be that translator between teams. And but the big thing is for finishing editors as well as graphic people, you get to be creative in certain ways, but then it's really just it's versioning, right? It's what we call it, which it is you have a promo, and then you have to have a Thursday tonight, and next version. You have to make sure all the graphics say Thursday. You have to make sure all the audio says Thursday. You don't want someone saying Thursday and a graphic coming up that says Wednesday. This is why I said that a lot of people in post-production are OCD. You want to focus on those details. And not every editor is built to do that. There are some editors who are just built to be creative. And then there are some editors who really this is like the perfect combination for them to be creative. There's a lot of problem solving. You might get a sequence that comes in and it's not matching, it's not working, or a graphic's not working in quite the same way, and you have to figure out how to make it work. It's also where a room producer's job comes in. If a graphic comes in wrong, do I need to call the graphics department? Do I need to have them re-export it? Or is this something that we're going to be able to do in the Avid and just get it because it's, it's easier just to do that way. So it's a very different mindset. So a finishing editor is just, especially in Onair Promo, there's a little more tedium to it, but you sort of have to enjoy that tedium. So I do. I don't know what that says about me, but probably just that I'm a little OCD. The other parts of post-production that you maybe don't think about as much is mixing. And so you get a lot of audio. You get the audio, you get a basic mix from the creatives, and they turn that in. And when they do, it's our job to sweeten it. And it's also our job to add VO to it. And so one of my absolute favorite things that I get to do that I never really ever thought about being able to do or even really knew about was I got to direct VOs. And I still do, actually. Now at Freeform, I'm not in the room as much, so I don't direct VOs, but I still coach voiceover, and I have found it to be one of the most creative, incredibly satisfying, fun things that I do. So when you get a mix, you get a basic mix, you get a scratch track from your editor, which is usually pretty bad, and you certainly wouldn't want in your final promo. There are a few exceptions, but most of them are pretty bad. And but you get a final, so you get then it's our job to sweeten it. And very much for mixers in a room in promo, it's being creative, it's maybe adding things, but it truly is sweetening at this point. Like, you should have pretty good groundwork from your editor of what the audio is going to look like. Every editor is different, every producer is different. Some are sloppy, some have like really great timelines that come in and you can work with them. You kind of learn who you're working with and you kind of know what to expect. And most of my editors, both audio mixers and editors, kind of went with it. If it were something really bad that we needed fixed, we'd reach out to the writer producer and say, please don't do this anymore. But in mixing, we really are just sweetening. And I had a lot of conversations with the mixers that I work with, and they felt very much the same way as I think my finishing editors did, that they felt that they were a different kind of mixer, that they could go quickly, that it was a different kind of creativity. They didn't want to like I was talking to a mixer who he had worked with bands and he had done like some of music production and he had hated it. He is like, I just didn't want to find the perfect drum beat. You know, it was just, he just wasn't creative. He didn't feel like, and he was incredibly creative and actually a very good musician on top of it. But that was not his wheelhouse. Like he really, like, he was just one of those people who just like, he puts his head down and he works and he wants to get it out, and he could be super fast. He was really good, but it was just a different kind of creativity. He was great if someone had a sound effect and he felt that he had a better sound effect, he could put that in and he would change it, and he knew that it would sound better. But he was really very much built for promo. And I think most of my promo editors were exactly the same way. Or mixers. They really, they enjoyed the speed. They could really hear the details, and they could make things, perfect, and they could make dialogue perfect. And it's just like, it wasn't theirs from the beginning, and they were okay with that. And I think that's the difference. Like they were taking someone else's timeline and then finishing to make it really sound good. And I think that in post-production, you have to realize like it's not yours from the beginning. And again, that suits my personality. I'm perfectly happy getting it done and executing the vision. Again, the other thing maybe people don't think about so much is, you know, the disembodied voice you hear all the time, whether it's on commercials or cartoons or, in my world, VO. It's something to think about in post-production as well. I have built an incredible relationship with the voiceover community, something I never imagined in my life, that I would be part of this huge community. I am friends with agents. I am friends with the voiceover artists themselves. They are a whole segment of people that work with productions in various ways. Like I said, I mean, voiceover has different things. I will try and stay focused on what I work on, but obviously voiceover has different things, like I said, commercial and cartoons, and I think that's where most people think about it. But voiceover for promo is huge. I mean, when you think of all the networks that are out there, you definitely everybody has voiceover. At the network we're at, I'm at Freeform. We have kind of really, I'd say like two main people with a couple peripheral people that we use on a regular basis. But just this past week, I got auditions for 3 different things. I talked to 3 different agents. Halloween's coming up, so I had to get auditions for Talking Pumpkins. We have a new show coming up that they decided they wanted a completely different read and something more fun. So I called an agent who I've known probably for 10 years, and I got a bunch of auditions from them. And then again, going back to Halloween, they needed some witches, which are character reads. So it's a huge part of post-production. It is just an absolute massive part of Onair Promo is voiceover, and I think something people really take for granted. If you listen to any network, most networks have anywhere like probably 2 to 3 people that they use on a regular basis. CBS was an exception. We had about like 9 or 10 people that we used on a regular basis, which for me was probably the most amazing thing, because I just got to work with a lot of different people and a lot of different personalities. It's also something, as a room producer, you need to know how to talk to actors. You might think, oh, I work in post-production, I'm never going to see actors or talk to actors. Voiceover artists are actors, and you need, like, I feel that my job is to make them comfortable in a room. I think having worked on shows and been around actors and hung around stages, I got very comfortable working with actors right from the beginning. actors on stages have to come in and do ADR, so they're doing a lot, they're kind of working, doing like looping and ADR, and they're working in that world. And most of them hate it. Most stage actors are not a fan of doing ADR at all. And so you have to, it was the very beginnings of me learning how to talk to an actor and say, and make them feel comfortable. Again, nothing I ever planned, and it has in so many ways just turned out to be this lovely like side gig that I do, and part of a community I didn't think that I'd really be part of. So at CBS, like I said, we did everything in-house. So for me, it was very rare that I had to talk to anybody who wasn't, 20 feet down the hall. If I needed something, I could just walk and find them to get them. Obviously, these days, no one's walking down the hallway anywhere. Everybody's working from home. Also, something that was a pretty amazing thing, maybe I'll get back to that at the end if I have a little time. But either way, when I started working at Freeform, my Posthouse is out of house. They are a post facility. They're called Keep Me Posted. And there's nothing that finishes in-house. So everything I do, the transition for me when we started working from home was actually very easy. The only thing that was hard is that I had only been at Freeform for 2 months before we all came home. And so I was still sort of learning my job. But the good thing is I had a really good foundation. CBS gave me a really good foundation. And at this point, I've been working in post-production for 20 years. And I've learned how to talk to every department. Like I said, it's really important. So, but now I have to deal with a company, I'm their client. And they're my, and they're my vendor. And I am, first of all, incredibly lucky just to have this vendor who works incredibly hard for us. They are an assigned team, so I'm not getting random people working for me. That's generally the case. Like if you're at a network, you're going to have like set people who are assigned to you because they know they're going to have work for you every single day. But I have to do everything blind now. I'm not in a room. I will say that is the thing I miss most. I actually really enjoyed being in a room with editors, being part of that process of getting everything on air, and I love color correction, and like I said, I love voiceover and audio, and mostly I love my editors. I love just kind of sitting in a room, and I will say take advantage of every single person you work with. If you're going to sit 8 hours in a room with an audio guy, ask questions, learn things. I have learned everything just by asking questions. I mean, you learn by sitting in a room and by being there, and certainly the experience of it. But I ask, why are you doing that all the time? I can't stress that enough. just ask questions. So back to my post facility though. So KMP is great, but like I said, they're not under our roof. And so I don't necessarily know their process of getting things done. It could vary from the way I've done things, but ultimately post-production translates pretty well. It's pretty consistent. So while they might not do the day-to-day thing or the individual things exactly like I did them, I know that when I talk to my post facility, whatever I ask them to do makes sense. And mostly I can tell by the way they talk to me that we have a good relationship, that it's not contentious, that that when things get messy, I've been able to clear things up. And I think that's really important. Like, you have to know what's going on, which means you don't have to know everything, but you have to have a good basic idea of what everybody does, to have respect for what everybody does, and to understand the timeline for how things are going to work. So I might not be in a room anymore, but I spent years in a room. So I know what's missing. So so at a post facility, they have the same kind of rooms that we did. They have editors and finishing editors. They have audio bays. They have people who are who are both recording. The mixer will be recording voiceover, and then you have a room producer who's directing voiceover. You're patching in, possibly, not always, the writer, producer, or creative director to be in on that read, so they can direct the read and give you an idea of where they want it to be and how they want it to sound. And quite sometimes it's annoying to have creatives in the room because you want to do your own thing, but ultimately it makes things a lot easier because they you know, you're giving them exactly what they want. I will say one of the hardest things about post-production is, like I said, you're executing somebody else's vision, and that is ultimately what you want to do. But sometimes, you know, something could be better and someone might come in and make it worse, or you think it's worse, and you got to remind yourself that it's all subjective and it's all okay, because it's really hard to watch something that you loved and you took time to do well and that you think is right, and then someone coming in and saying, you know what, I think that shot needs a little more yellow in it, and you're like, no, it doesn't. And you know what, you put the yellow in because they have different eyes and they have different ears, and if it looks or sounds better to the creative and it's more in line with what they want, you got to do what they want. So and to expand on post-production, though, in a post facility, and to kind of keep in mind some of the jobs that are out there. So not only should you remember there are post facilities, this is a huge deal, there are tons of them and tons of jobs. There are people at post facilities who are working on both long form and short form. There are post facilities that are just audio houses. There are post facilities that do everything. There are post facilities that KMP, Keep Me Posted, where I work, they're part of Photochem, which is larger. I have a friend who works on reality shows, and when he gets all of his, he's a post producer, and when he gets all of his editors set up for finishing, he calls Photochem, and Photochem sets up all of their servers and all of their edit bays, and everything runs through them. So it's a huge process. So if you're a really technical person and you love post-production, that might be where you want to be. We have a guy who is fully dedicated, who is our social editor. He's changing the sizes of things for and repositioning all the shots only for things that go out for our social media. So it's a huge process and so many people. So there's people like me. I mostly talk to my counterpart over there. She is the manager of post-production at the post facility. And then I am the person who is connected to everything that's going on. I'm the one who's having conversations with the creative team. I go to assignments meetings. I'm the one who keeps them up to date with everything that's coming their way. I'm also the one who might have to problem solve for them, or I now, which is not one of my favorite things, I have to kind of hammer out budgets with them and figure out if something is going to cost more and make sure that that's okay with everybody. We recently started working just with some shoot spots, and they decided they want to finish those in 4K. And because of that, I have a special colorist who's just a dedicated colorist for that, because my finishing editor doesn't have the equipment to work in 4K. And that's okay too, but it means now we have to figure out the schedule, and that's part of it. And I'm working with the people, at KMP, who are bringing all of that together for me to get it done. So we couldn't figure out how to do things, and we had to have a Zoom meeting, and I had 6 different people from 6 different departments all trying to figure out how we were going to get it done. And it really was about a 10-minute call, and that's all it took. But I had people who were on the technical side who had to digitize and up-res all of this footage, and I had a scheduler, I had my counterpart over there, and as well as a coordinator and editor, all just trying to figure out how to get things done. So it's a huge group of people working, and we're working on 30-second spots. And so it's still quite a lot of people who are involved. And I just think it's such a huge process. And I think mostly, like I said, to this day, people look at me and they say, "Oh, are you an editor?" And it's like, that's all they think about for post-production. Like I said, it's just I'm biased. I think it's one of the best ways to get into the industry. I think if you can edit, I think if you know your equipment, then it's a perfect way to get in anywhere. I think very often, if you're getting started and you're thinking that you want to work on long form and you want to work and you just want to work on a show, that you might overlook working at a facility, which might be an excellent in. It doesn't have to be your last stop. It could be, you might really like it, but it will give you the experience. It will introduce you to every single department. If you work on a show, it's the same deal. You work in every single department. You're gonna talk to people on stage. You're gonna talk to graphics people. You have to know a little bit about everything. You also have to know when you don't know things. I'm not particularly technical, and so if things start getting technical, I make sure all the right people are talking to each other. So in my world, it's just a lot of management. I feel like I do a lot of translating. I think that the creative team doesn't always understand what needs to go down in post-production, and I think post-production doesn't always understand the creative team. So sometimes you have to be the translator for that. I got a question. Hi, Anthony. Is it possible to enter the field as an editor and eventually become a manager, or do most editors remain in the roles long term? The truth is, I don't think there's any one answer for anybody. My path was uniquely my path. I still have a lot of friends that I started out with as a production assistant working on shows. Those friends are still working on shows now. They've, graduated to become, co-producers and producers on various projects. In an editor situation, I think especially at a facility, I'm going to say, yes, that's true. I think if you're an editor and you're cutting, then if you're in a facility, then you might not want to be the one who pushes the buttons after a while. You might decide that you want to take a management path and you want to be the one who is just running the editors and scheduling them and upgrading equipment and being part of that process. So I would say most editors continue to edit, but there's not one good answer for that at all. Like, it is so, it's really going to be, it's going to be your own path. But what I would say is, again, to keep in mind that, like I said, post-production is huge. It's just a huge way to do a lot of things. So I think if you're an editor and that's where you start, and I think it gives you a view of everything else that's going on. It gives you the opportunity to really look at, to look around and decide, like, oh, you know what, maybe I want to go over there. I think that's what happened to me when I left shows. I knew I wanted to be at a network, and when I got to a network, I was like, oh yeah, this is where I want to be, because I can see other paths that I want to take. And when I was on shows, I just didn't feel that way. I really felt like I wasn't going to be happy doing what I was doing, and I didn't necessarily want my boss's job. And when I got to network, I realized there were different ways that I could go and different you know, I started as a coordinator at CBS, and I wasn't in a room as a room producer, but I was like, no, 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 I want to do that. Like, I know that that's where I want to be. I want to be in that room. And I actually had to leave CBS and then come back to CBS for like several years after that. But that all worked out. So I would say no role is long-term unless you want it to be long-term. I think the more open you are, and the more questions you ask, and the more you see, and the more experience you get, the more likely you are to, I'm not going to say the more likely you are to move, I'm going to say the more likely you are to make the decision that's best for you. Hey, Zeke. Do I have a standard workflow for a project, and did I develop it prior to getting to the network or once you were there? I'm going to say yes, I do have a standard workflow for working at a network. It's a little of both. I think as people, as you move through your career, that you are, you're going to kind of figure out your own workflow, because as you learn things, you become a better manager. I like to say there's a lot of things that you can be a superstar at. Like, you can be like a superstar actor or editor or director, and you can be really like, or just like really creative and off the charts creative, and that's like born with you and it's innate. But one of the things that is very much learned is management. You just kind of, it becomes trial and error. If you're really lucky, you have some good mentors who are ahead of you, and you get a sense of what they do, and you're like, oh yeah, that works. I think I've been really lucky for the most part, and I think part of it is my personality as well. When I first was in a room with an online editor, when I was first in the room with an online editor, I came in, and there were things we had to do, like we had to do push-ins, and it's just a whole list of things. And I had taken a highlighter, and I had highlighted in different colors all the different things that we had to do. And I handed it to my online editor, and I said, hey, I don't know how you work, but like, this is, I just made this sheet for you. It seems simple. And he like looked at me wide-eyed and was so happy that I had given him this. I had come in organized. And I think that's the big thing. So the first thing is to be organized. And after that also, he loved me for doing that and answered every single question I ever had. Like, he would literally turn around and like look me straight in the eye and say, this is why we do things. So I can't emphasize enough, in post-production, be organized. If you don't have the answer, say you don't have the answer, and then go find the answer. But if you just, there's really no room for bullshit, to be honest. It's just like, you got to get stuff done, and you got to get the answer. With that said, some workflows are really set in place. I would say don't disrupt a workflow until you learn someone else's workflow. So CBS had it pretty down. Like, there are just certain things, everyone kind of had their place and what they did, and you kind of went with that workflow. With that said, they just had someone new come in, and their workflow is being changed to a great degree. So it happened after I left, but I know that that's true. When I got to Freeform, again, post-production translates really easily through, there's just a through line from like all the different facilities. And I think as you continue through, you realize that there are definitely like set workflows that they're going to have. So even if people are tweaking them in little ways, but one of the things I found when I went to Freeform, I stole something from CBS. So CBS, we used to have, we had a thing called Promo Tracker, which is exactly what it sounds like. It tracks the promos that need to be produced. And we would have the day. So you would look at the day, and you said, these are all the promos that need to get done today. And when I got to Freeform, they did not have anything like that, and things were getting lost, and tags weren't getting done. And so I created my own day. And so it's a little extra work, but I pull information from a database, and I put it in a spreadsheet, and I look at it all day and I say, this is what I need to get done. And it really helps me keep track of things. So in that case, it's something that doesn't exist for Freeform that it now exists. I give it to my coordinator, so he has it if he needs it. And I basically am very aware of everything that needs to get produced all day. My facility provides me with the work that they're doing, so I can, like every day they send out what they're going to be doing, so I can stay on track with them as well. So yeah, so I would say there pretty much is a standard workflow, though. Like I said, it translates. There is definitely, like, you're going to have a creative. It's going to go through several revisions on the creative side. We also have to send it through legal, and there's also all of that. It has to go through legal, S&P. You have to make sure music gets cleared. So music is very much a part of post-production too. I don't work with them quite directly. It's more on the creative side if they're choosing a track. But we do all the music reporting, so we have to make sure everybody's getting paid, including libraries. Once it comes into finishing, again, it goes through a pretty standard thing. It comes into finishing. You have to get it to the editor. You have to make sure everything relinks. You got to get it color corrected. You have to make sure all the versions are done, and then ultimately, you have to go through approval processes. So you got to get the writer producer to sign off on it, and you got to get the creative director to sign off on it as well. They're signing off on color. They're signing off on the edit. They're signing off on the audio. They're signing off on the read. So there are some pretty basic things. I think it's like the little details that might get changed. Hey, MJ, so do you think Avid is going to be the preferred cutting platform, or are more people moving to Premiere for Onair Promo? I almost said this right at the beginning because I knew it was going to be a question, and it's a good question. I don't have an answer for you. I'm going to say it's probably good to be familiar with both at this point. I think Avid still has, I think it's still going to be around, is what I think. I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. My finishing facility uses Avid, and everybody who works on the Freeform Disney side is also using Avid at this point. We have outside vendors who definitely use Premiere, and it works. We were at CBS, we were using Premiere. We had just started for some of our all access shows. We were trying to finish on Premiere. The problem for me, Premiere was fine. It was fine for editing. We had a huge volume at CBS. We delivered anywhere from 125 to 225 promos every day. Generally in the 100, 125 was our basic delivery, which is a lot. And Premiere was not set up to go through our finishing. It wasn't connected to our ISIS. It was just a lot. So it didn't work quite as well for the volume that we had. With that said, I'm going to say Premiere is the first, it's the first system I've seen that's had legs. Like, I don't think it's going anywhere. I think because it's connected, obviously, with Adobe and graphics, that it's, I think it's going to be popular. It works really well. People are getting good, they're getting good results. It's cheaper, so I think if you're working on your own, it's obviously something that is just more affordable, and it's definitely at a high enough professional level that there's no reason not to use it. Avid and Premiere, they seem to talk well enough to each other in terms of finishing. We're able to bring in projects pretty simply. Both at CBS, whenever we did use, usually around like upfront time when we did use vendors, we were able to bring the projects in for finishing without too much trouble. And so learn both, be familiar with both. That's what I have to say. I think those two are probably going to be the two competitive platforms, and where Avid just dominated and was the only one for a really long time, I think Premiere is going to be around, and I think it's probably only going to get better. So it's probably worth knowing both. But I don't think one's going to take over the other. I could be I could be lying about that. I am older, so I do have sort of an affinity for people who edit on Avid, because it's just what I sort of grew up with. But no, both. That's what I can say about that. All right, guys, it's 12 o'clock. I'm more than happy to answer any other questions. I don't know if I think I pretty much touched on anything. I really just wanted to give you a good overview on how big everything is. And that's mostly just that there's so much opportunity in post-production, that don't just think it's editing. Just know there's management positions, know that there's technical positions, and it's only getting bigger. I really think with the digital world, I think that it's really going to get even bigger, because I think digital is really, especially in Onair Promo and the marketing team, it's just huge. And short form is going to get really big, and it's going to be under a network banner. If I can leave you with anything, I think that I would just, the biggest thing, and this really goes just in general, but like I said, in post-production, you work with so many people, that, be nice, be professional, be curious, don't be afraid to not have the answers. Always ask questions. I love post-production so much because you don't stop learning. There's things that are just so consistent throughout it. Like I said, there's like through lines that carry from the time I started 30 years ago, and yet it's a completely different industry with technology constantly changing. So there's just there's so much to learn. Hey, Dara. Dara is a production designer. Do you have a few minutes to chat about your interface with us breeds? Thank you. First of all, I'm glad that you've liked it. Yeah, production designer. So production designer in terms of like set production design, not graphic design. I would say production designer, in those terms, I probably have less to tell you in terms of post-production. I think you're probably going to be working with, so if you're on the art department, you're probably going to be working more with stage people. At that point, I made them sound like they were sort of aliens at that point. They're not, but people on the stage, people who I enjoy very much. I think in terms, where it comes to someone like production designer, I think when you're working in terms of post-production, it's probably going to be if something is effects heavy, if, like what is going to be needed to bring it into the editing world. If it's just production designer, production design is pretty basic. If you're building a set and you're creating a room, you're really going to be working more with people who are, you're going to be working with the DP, and you're going to be working with the producers and the editors, who are going to have like that initial vision of how they want things to look, what kind of mood they want, and the color that they want. So you're going to be executing that on stage, but hopefully all of that will wind up translating back. It's up to the director and the producers to do it. In terms of marrying VFX and sound effects with the physical sets, again, I think that comes more, it's probably a little out of my wheelhouse, both because it's technical and because I still do think you're going to be working in those terms. You'd probably have like a VFX person on stage who's going to be working with you on that to figure out what they need. In terms of like green screen and stuff like that, it's there will be somebody on stage, and those tend to be like pre-production meetings of how things are going to translate, and kind of giving someone like me a heads up of there's going to be a heads up of like, hey, they're doing a really like effects heavy thing, and this is what you can expect. And this is when I pretty much start making phone calls, and I get all the technical people together to make sure they're all saying everything. I personally don't like to be the one to translate too much of that because it's probably a little above my head. So for me, it would be getting someone like you, getting the VFX director, probably getting a producer on the line, and getting, whether it's a Posthouse or the initial editor or the graphics people in the end, and just making sure that everything's getting shot the way it needs to get shot. I can say at CBS when we did a few cool shoots, and the head of our graphics department went to the shoots, and so he worked with everybody there to make sure that he was getting what he wanted. So when he came back and he started, putting it into their system and working with it, that they could get it. But you're probably not going to talk to me too much about someone like me. So you're probably going to talk to more of the creative team. And then we're just more on the back end, just making sure that we have the equipment. We might need different drives, or, depending on how you're shooting and stuff. So, yeah, I think, anyone else have any questions? If not, I think that's all. You guys can, I think it was provided to you, but if you have any questions, I am both on Twitter and Instagram. It's Lainie610 for everything. I'm happy to talk to you guys anytime if you have questions. I love my job and I love talking about it. So feel free to reach out if you need anything else or want any more information. Thanks so much. I appreciate you guys being here.